All right, Shalom Israel. Y'all Bashim Yahshai Brak Thumb. Y'all Shemal Thumb Bashim Yahshai. I'm Preaching Officer Parak holding it down for the ISUPK weekly Hebrew class, otherwise known as Allah Shawan Kodash class, where we study the ancient and the modern Hebrew. All right, today's class will be pretty quick. We're just going to be going over formatting sentences, formulating sentences without verbs and with verbs, right? Before we get it kicked off, right, I just want to read this scripture. I read it damn every time I teach the Hebrew class. It's Zephaniah, the 3rd chapter, starting at verse 8, right? It says, Therefore wait ye upon me, saith Yahweh, until the day that I rise up to the prey. For my people, for my determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms, to pour upon them my indignation, even all my fierce anger. For all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. Right? So this, of course, is a prophetic scripture talking about the Most High coming and destroying the nations for what they've done to the children of Israel. Verse 9 goes on to read, For then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of Yahweh to serve him with one consent. The reason why I like to bring that scripture out every time I teach the Hebrew class is because that's the language that we are doing, that we are practicing here today. Right? The scriptures say to rehearse the righteous acts. And that's why we each week, every Friday, we have a class where we rehearse the righteous acts. We rehearse what we just read. That pure language, that pure tongue, it's talking about this right here, the ancient Hebrew. So I just wanted to read that real quick, right? Before we get into the class. Let me get this real quick. So once again, right, we will be going over sentences with and without verbs, right? So we'll be beginning with sentences without verbs. All right, we starting without verbs first. This is pretty simple, right? This is real basic. It's not that hard to take a hold of, right? I got a couple of example sentences for you, right? So beginning, we're going to use David's name for this one, just as he's going to be the proper noun in this sentence. So you would, the first one we're going to go over is he is, was, will be. All right. And then directly underneath that, I'll give you what that is in Hebrew. I'm going to give you a longer version of that, right, before we translate it into the Hebrew. All right. So I'm going to kind of explain this real quick. All right. So, of course, you have the subject here. The subject is David. That's the proper noun of who we're talking about, right? And then we also have here, same subject, right, which is going to be David again. The difference, though, on this second one is we'll be adding a verb to the sentence, right? To see something is a verb, right? You see any goddamn thing, that's a verb, right? So now there are several ways that we can break this first one down, right? I'm gonna go ahead and see what color I should use. So all this is saying is he is, was, or will be David. The translation in the Hebrew, Awah. And I'm gonna put a little asterisk here next to Awah, right? So that's what this is in the Hebrew, right? So the reason I got this little asterisk here is because the term or the word Awah in Hebrew is literally, it can be a variation of one of these three things, depending on what you add to it, right? So the root, when you're talking about something is something, the root would be Awah. right? I'll go into that in just a second, right? But that's the root. When you want to say he is, or that thing is, or whatever the case, you want to say a why. We're talking about David. He is David, right? Pretty simple. Now, we're going to get a little bit more deeper into that sentence, right? Because that's, of course, a real simple sentence, a sentence that has no verbs in it, right? Now we have a sentence that has a verb and has a subject. You get what I'm saying? So now you have the verb and the subject, whereas this one just had the subject, right? Which, of course, was the proper noun David. So now we're going to write this same sentence, but we're going to write it in the Hebrew. And I'm gonna try to break it up so that way you can understand how to pronounce it. So I'll put little dashes in between so you can kind of make sense of it. All right. So now you have ra'ath, right? So ra'ayath and then ya, right? And then ayash, right? So now this is the first part of the sentence, right? To see, the very verb to see is ra'ayath, right? To say I see or I saw, you would say ra'ayath ya, right? You add this ya to it, which means it's possessive to you, meaning I saw. Ayash just means a man, right? That's all that means. It's just the Hebrew term for a man, right? So now we have that whole part of the sentence. All we have to do is now add this to it, right? So real simple, right? Real simple. So now what we have here is you have a basic sentence, which really is just kind of, it's real straight to the point. It's real vague, right? And then you have this other sentence where you're going to add on that verb to it. The verb here, let me try to keep it all color coordinated, right? The verb here is to see, right? So now what you see here is Ra'ath Yashua Awada Wada. That all that means is I saw a man and it was David, right? And he was David. Right? So that's pretty simple. It's actually not, it gets a little bit more complicated than this, but it doesn't get much more complicated than this, right? I mean, this is pretty simple, right? Once again, that ya that you see here at the end, all that means is that's a possessive of see or saw. That's it. Ayash is just a vocabulary word that you've probably heard if you've been watching our classes, a million times. Ayash is a vocabulary word that just means man, right? That wa just means and usually when the same thing with with the English language or any language, that word wa or and just means it's connecting the sentence together. So I saw a man and he was David, right? Wa, of course, he is or was, and of course that is David. All right, that's pretty simple. We'll move on in just a second. In case anybody want to take notes, right? You go ahead and take notes. And I'll just actually, I forgot to write this out in the Hebrew. You never really want to write it like this unless it's just for teaching purposes. I'm going to write it out in the Hebrew characters. I'm going to do the ancient Hebrew. All right. My handwriting is not, the most beautiful in Hebrew or English, right? But hopefully everybody can see that online. All right, what you see underneath those characters are just basically, they're kind of like diacritical marks. They kind of just show you how to pronounce. So when you write it out in the English, it kind of makes sense on how to pronounce it. But when you write it out in the Hebrew, if you don't know and you're just learning Hebrew, you need these marks to understand, right? So when you see an upside down mark, all that means is that you pronounce that character to its entirety, right? So you'll say Ra, the whole Ra. Next, you have the Ah, you pronounce the entirety of the Ah, right? So Ra'ah. And then you have the Ya and the Tha, right? You have the Ra, then it's like the Ya and the Tha connected. You see these two are connected. So you would say Yath, right? So you pronounce, in those cases, the entirety of the first character, and then only the beginning sound of the second character, the beginning consonant of the second character, which would be th, right? So Rayathia, same thing for this, right? Pretty simple. You have the ah separated, so it's just ah by itself, and then you have the ya and the sha connected, so it's yash, right? So ayash. It's a pretty simple concept. If anybody has any questions online in the room, you can always ask. You can put it in the comment section. That's kind of what I'm here for. So I'm gonna leave this up here just for a little bit. I didn't do this one here, right, in the ancient Hebrew, only because it's right here. You get what I'm saying? It's the same sentence that's up there, just in the end of this sentence. Once again, we all know that Hebrew is written from right to left, all right? So you can kind of compare what you see here to the chart here, which also shows you the Hebrew characters, all right? I'm gonna leave y'all alone, give y'all a little bit of time. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and erase this. Anybody that's watching online, you can simply go back to it later and rewind. All right, take this title off because it might be kind of confusing because I just did two in a row, but one had a verb and one did not. So it's blocking. All right, so now, if you remember that term awa, right? That of course means the root of it means is, right? Something is something. He is David, right? Now we're going to get into the variations of awa, right? So this is how you're going to be able to distinguish if somebody's talking about the past, present, or the future, right? Because if you just simply say awa dawada, that could mean he is David, he was David, or he will be David, right? So let's get into the different forms, right? So now I'm going to write this up here. I'll just write this up here so you can kind of understand. We'll just do the example first. So you have he was David. Then you have he will be. Locking. All right. And then let's get some real examples, right? So we'll say David was a father and David will be a father. Now, these, of course, are things that we should have learned as children. I say this all the time, right? Because these are real basic sentences, and it may be easy for you to kind of be like, what the hell are we learning this for? You know what I'm saying? You might want to get to the meat first, right? But this is really what we need first is the milk, because this is the way, remember, if you have not been studying Hebrew for longer than 5 years, then you are at the grade level of a kindergartner when it comes to Hebrew. So you have to remember that because we haven't been taught. Remember, at the age of 5, you were taught English or maybe Spanish was your first language or whatever the case was, right? So these basic things that you learn, that you would learn in kindergarten, right? You now have to learn now for another language, right? You have to learn that for Hebrew because you weren't raised understanding those things. So that's all. That's why these things are, that's why it's important to start small. Because like I said, these sentences, they're real small sentences, real, it's something that a kindergartner would learn, right? But like I said, if you haven't been studying Hebrew for longer than 5 years, then that, of course, is the level of scholarship that you have when it comes to Hebrew. All right, so now, which most people, if they're tuning in, most likely have not been studying Hebrew for 5 years. Right. So now what we'll do is we'll get these in the English. In the English characters, right? In the English letters, right? So now, all right. So we're getting into the forms of hayah. Now, once again, a wa by itself means is, but now if you want to put tense on it, right? So for instance, right, you want to say he was David. You would say awa hayah dawada. Right? That's how you want to say that, right? To put the tense on it. So the hayah is what really puts the tense on the previous word, which is awa, which makes it was, right? Now you have he will be David, right? Same thing, very similar, right? Awa. The difference is you're gonna say ya hayah. Then of course dawada. All right. Now the reason for that, all that is just giving it a separate tense. So you have hayah by itself, which means was. Hopefully anybody online can see that. I think you kind of understand, right? This will be, will be, right? So you have your future tense, and then you have your you have your past. I hope once again this camera, we're gonna get a new camera soon. Hopefully the camera is picking up all of these things here, right? But all that is to signify tense, right? Whether it's past, present, or future, right? So real simple. You want to just say he is David, you would just say awa dawada. But if you want to say he was David, you would say awa hayah dawada. Same thing for he will be David. Now you're going to change the tense into future tense, which is awa yahaya dawada, right? So now we're going to add a little bit to the sentence, right? Add just a little bit to the sentence, because those are pretty simple sentences. Now let's add another let's add another subject to it, because now you're going to have David and father, right? Two subjects in the same sentence. Whereas you go back up to what we just learned, it's just one subject, right? And all this really is doing here, all we're doing here with adding another subject is just kind of, showing you how you can expand your sentences. Because the more vocabulary you know, with this understanding of how you can make things past tense and future tense, if you got that down, all you got to learn is vocabulary. You get what I'm saying? Once you get the vocabulary down, then you'll be able to formulate a lot more sentences, right? And you'll start to surprise yourself. Now, so of course, it's talking about David being the father. So da. Now remember, it says was, so we're going back to what? We'd be going back to Yahaya, right? Or Slack, you'd be going back to just Haya. Now we're talking about a father, right? The word father, or the word father in the Hebrew is just Abba. All right? So we're going to do the same thing with this sentence. This David will be, same thing that we did up here, we'll take it down here, even though we're adding another subject, right? So Dawuda Yahaya. You fix that. I told y'all I ain't got the best handwriting in the world, so lucky for that. All right. Make sure that makes more sense. All right. So now, same thing, right? That principle stands wherever you take it to, and that's kind of the point I'm trying to make here, right? The principle of past and present and future tense, when it talks about something is something, right? Making that comparison, that always stands. There are no variations of that besides these here. Now, when you get into different things, well, I'm not going to confuse you with it, but when you get into certain different subjects, then it can change. But in relation to what we're talking about right here, it's always awa, haya, or yahaya, right? That's what it always is. And that's what I want everybody to learn first, because that's one of the simplest forms of past, present, and future tense. You get what I'm saying? So I am going to leave this up for just a minute. Maybe I'll do like one or two of these. I'll do these bottom two in the Hebrew. Just so you can have the reference if you're not keen on doing the Hebrew. I'm going to do it over on this side. All right. All right. Put these here real quick. All right. Don't forget about these connectors. When you learn the language, you always want to have those. If you go back into ancient times, they didn't necessarily need them every time they wrote, because if you wrote Dawuda, you would know exactly what it's saying, right? You would know exactly how to pronounce it, especially within context, right? But for learning purposes, you always want to keep these. Your first 5 years of learning this, you want to keep these, right? Just because it's going to help you to remember certain words and how to pronounce. All right, but I'm going to keep this up for a little bit, and then we'll move on to the next subject. All right, let's move on. So now we understand how to say how to have these different forms, these past, present, and future tense forms of is. Right? You got was, is, and will be. Now we're going to move on to something else that you can tie directly into this. Now remember, this is all about being able to formulate sentence properly. You want to be able to formulate proper sentences, you got to know these things, right? So because that's the case, I need a better eraser. Now, but in all actuality, because that's the case, the more that you learn on top of these things, you will be able to formulate sentences the more that you know, right? So instead of you sounding like a third grader, right, or a kindergartner trying to talk, right, you will sound like a man that is, or a woman that is well versed in the language of Hebrew, right? I understand that there are a lot of people that don't give a damn about the Hebrew. Fine, to each their own, right? But of course, under the tutelage of the ISUPK and the commanding general Yohana and under Christ, we're going to learn everything about our history and about our culture as possible, right? So now we're going to move on to the terms this and these, right? So we're talking about those two things just here for a second. So just to get it, real quick. So now when it comes to the Hebrew or any language, right? These are two very important terms. And the reason why they're important terms is because when you go and you realize the types of sentences that you say in English all the time, a lot of times when you're trying to describe something, you'll say this or you'll say these, right? So for this, there are two variations that you'll find, right? I want to maybe not have it all blue, just so that way we can have a clear distinction. So lucky, y'all. I know I'm kind of weird about that, but I want to make sure, especially on that camera. Or, so you have Zaha or you have Za'ath. All right? For these, Allah. Right? So you'll have, let's try to keep it in order. So you have Za'ah, and you have Za'ath. Right? For these, you have Allah. Right? All right, hopefully that's big enough for y'all to see. So those are the variations, right? So now you have this. There are two variations. I'll get into why there's those variations. Give you a couple of examples about. Actually, Slocky, don't take that note down, Slocky. I was just looking at it like that ain't look right. All right. All right. So you have the two variations, Zahah and then Za'ath. All right. And then you have it in the Hebrew there if you ever want to take the notes down. And then of course you have these, which is Allah, which is multiple thises, right? If you want to break it down like that. All right, which is Allah or Allah, right? So now let's get a few different examples of when you would use this, right? And this is real. Once again, this is real simple. Let's get some examples. So within this, right, um, within this, you're going to get some vocabulary words as well. A lot of brothers already know these, but there are some that may not. The point of this is not the vocabulary; it's to learn how to understand how to use these, this and these in a sentence. But these you'll all get you'll get vocabulary words out of all of these if you don't already know. Okay, so let's actually stop here. All right, we're gonna stop here because the next ones that I'll get into is these. All right, right now you see this, right? So these are pretty common sentences that you'll use. I don't want to say they're common sentences, but these are common formats or structures of a sentence that you will use in using these terms. All right, let me get a different color. Let's do blue for this one. So you have so the term malak means a king, right? It can also mean ruler or rule, right? This is the people, right? So what you have here, you'll use the same zaha and then ha'ain, right? The reason why it's ha'ain, remember the term ain is people, right? That's what that means in the Hebrew, ain. When I'm saying the people, it's talking about a specific people. So the, you would use the preposition ha, right? So zaha ha'ain, all right? Now, this is where it's going to change up a little bit, right? So now, instead of us using zaha, we're going to use za'af. Now, I'm going to explain to you why we would do that, right? Now, whenever I teach this, I always say you should be able to kind of tell already, but for sake of time, and I just want to kind of break it down real quick. You'll use this when you're referring to the feminine, right? So remember, we're talking about a mother. We're not talking about a father. We're not talking about a king. A king is a male, right? A king is masculine, right? So you will use the term zaha. Now, the term people is automatically you refer it to as masculine, right? That's why whenever you see the Bible use the word mankind, it's a masculine term, but it's talking about the entire planet, every person on the face of this planet, which of course includes females as well. But that's basically the breakdown of that. Now, when it comes to females, right, a mother, you would use za'af, right? So za'af amma, right? Now, this is another one that throws people for a loop. You're going to use za'af again. And the term for earth is aratazah. So you're using za'af again here because the earth or the land, right, which is the word here, the term land, ground, earth, whatever the case, right? City, I don't think city is something else. But that term, land or earth, that's a feminine term, right? I hate to use this example, but it helps people kind of understand. You ever heard somebody say like Mother Nature, right? The Bible doesn't call anything Mother Nature, but it does help people to understand why the term land or earth is feminine, right? So that's basically how you would use these two variations, because once again, you have Zaha and Za'af, right? So you have Zaha here and you have Za'af here, right? So those are the different times that you would use Zaha or Za'af. Now, we'll get into these in just a second. The term these, it's always the same, whether it's these men, these women, these fathers, these mothers. It's always the same. You'll see a couple of variations with how you'll spell certain things, but it's pretty much always going to be the same. We'll get into that in just a second, all right? After we get these done, all right? So just so we have the Hebrew up here, right? All right. right, hopefully everybody can read that. I kind of had to squeeze it in there, but I'm gonna leave it up there for a second so anybody want to take notes can take notes. It's always good to always, when you write it down like this is just so you understand how to pronounce it. But other than that, you want to write down the Hebrew as well, right? All right, so we've got plenty of time. Now we're going to get into these. Term these, when you use the term these. Now remember, this is singular, right? The term this you'll always use with singular things, right? This is a king, one king, right? You wouldn't say this is a king's, right? Because of course, kings is plural. So we're going to use the same examples, but we're going to make them plural, all right? By starting the sentence with these. So, for instance, these are kings, plural. All right. What else I got here? And let's just do a couple just for time's sake. So we'll do these are kings, and these are so now remember I told you, right, that there's going to be variation. Now you see there's a variation between male and female and feminine and masculine when you use the term this. The reason why you're not going to have a variation in the term these, right, which is Allah in the Hebrew, the reason why you're not going to have that variation is because the plural of these words is going to tell you whether it's masculine or feminine. So that's why this doesn't change, right? And I'll explain why, right? Let me see where we at. So now you have Allah Malakyum, right? So you're getting these from that term here, and then that yum is explaining, of course, it's masculine anyway, but it's explaining on the end because it's kings, Malakyum, multiple kings. So this doesn't need to change. There's never a time when this is going to have to change. When this term these or Allah, it's never going to have to change because the term in its plurality form is going to tell you whether it's masculine or feminine. Of course, it's king, so of course it's going to be masculine. A woman can't be a king, right? Let me see, what else do I have? Okay, these are the lands. I'm not going to put this one underneath, just because it's a little bit longer. So now, once again, the term Allah did not have to change because Haratazal Wath, that Wath here, shows you that it's feminine, right? The reason why, it's the same thing as like, for instance, you say Ak Yum, which the term Ak means brother. You say Ak Yum, it means brothers plural. That Yum means it's plural. Ak Wath would mean sister. I mean, it's like sisters, right? Or it's like a sister, just sister by itself, aqua, right? But that wath is showing that it's a feminine word, right? Now, then that gets into a little bit, then of course there's a lot of variations. I don't want to confuse you guys, but there can be a lot of variations. For instance, just like you have malak wath, right? So you have malak, which is king, and you have malak wath, which is kingdom. So there are little different variations with those types of terms and words. It'll kind of come as you go. You'll start to recognize the difference, right? But that's pretty much it. That's the simplicity in what we're learning here. And that's pretty much all I'm gonna give you, because when you go into using the term zaha or za'ath, or using the term Allah, you can pretty much, with any subject, right? You can use this with any subject, right? So I'm gonna leave this up here for just a second, and then we'll move on to the next thing. All right, so we're gonna get into the last little subject here, and this class has really been kind of like more so of a review, just to kind of sharpen your sword a little bit. These are real basic things, you know what I mean. So when we get into some definites, 1 second. Right. So we'll get into first we'll do definite nouns, okay? All right, definite nouns. Now, whenever you see the term around here, whenever you see the term ha, and anytime that you see that before a word or a noun, it's the or the, however the hell you want to say it, right? That's usually going to allow a noun to be definite, right? And what I mean when I say definite, I'm saying that it's when you see that ha, it's that thing right there, that specific thing, right? You can even replace definite with specific, but just going based off of English terminology, the way we've learned English, they would be considered definite nouns, all right? So let's do, okay, so let's do just a couple of these, right? Because I got a lot of different examples. I'm trying to pick which one I want to use. Let's do, okay, let's do this one first. All right, the good families, right? That's not, of course, the whole sentence. That's a part of the sentence, right? So we'll use that one, and then we'll use it also in its singular form, because that's plural, multiple families. So we'll do, all right, we'll just kind of put it underneath there. All right, so the good families, right? So the term, remember, we're saying the families. Now take the good out of it. Remember this. You're making it definite. This is a definite noun, the term families, because we're going to need a different marker, so lucky. The term families is definite because of the term the. Because of that word the, it makes this definite. This ain't got nothing to do with it, right? This is an adjective. This ain't got nothing to do with the subject, right? So this is made definite because of the, right? So now what we're going to do is, because the is there in English, we're going to put that on the term family as well. Let me see. So and this is the thing we got to remember too, right? Give me one second. Let me stop trying to multitask. So we have a plural of the term families, right? But that ha has to go in front of families here because it's in the sentence, right? And it also has to go in front of the adjective. That's what we also have to remember, right? All right? It has to happen that way, okay? So that's when it says definite nouns, it's really focused, a lot of it is focused around this ha here, the, right? That's what's making it definite. You get what I'm saying? So now, that's why you have to have that ha in front of both terms, in front of the subject and in front of the adjective as well, right? Or the descriptive word, if you want to call it that. All right? But now we're going to do the same thing, but now, same sentence, but now we're only talking about one family, right? So now this one's real simple. Right? The only thing that we're changing here is that we're taking the plurality off of it. I'm going to do this plurality underlined with red. Okay? That plural, this plural here, right, is causing each one, even the term good, is going to be plural. Because it's not talking about one good thing, it's talking about multiple good things. That's why you have ha-tawab wa, which is a plurality of tawab, which just means good, right? So you have to add it to the subject and to the descriptive term or to the adjective. Now down here, all you have to make sure you do is that you add the ha, which is definitive, to both terms. That's it, right? It is real simple, right? So that ha gotta stay there on both. Now, if you didn't care about being proper, then you could just say, Hamashipak Tuwa. You could just say that, but it's not proper Hebrew. So I'm not going to teach in proper Hebrew. I'm going to teach proper Hebrew, which includes ha on both the subject and the descriptive term or the adjective. All right. I'll leave it up there for a second, and then we're going to go over maybe one more set, and then we'll get up out of here. All right. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and erase this. We'll get one more subject here to go over. If you have that in your notes, you can really apply that to anything, right? You can apply that to damn near anything, any subject and adjective that you find in a sentence. Okay? Right? Okay, so now last thing we'll be going over is adjectives in noun noun sentences. Pray everybody can read my terrible handwriting, all right? All right, I'm gonna explain what that means in just a second. Let's get a couple examples, right? We're gonna do 3 total, and then we'll close it out with that. So the man, right? The man is what? The subject. And then you see is old, right? Old is an adjective, all right? Maybe I should do that in different colors. Maybe I will in just a second, all right? The mother is good. And we'll do the sons, plural. All right, now let me. So the mother is the subject. Good is the adjective. The sons, once again, is the subject. Wise is the adjective. So now, these are adjectives within these noun sentences. Remember that, right? Because remember, we just, at the beginning of this class, we said the king is David, or David is the king. There's no description there, right? A king is a title. It's not an adjective. The king is a noun, right? It's a noun. David is a proper noun, right? So there were no adjectives there. So now we have these adjectives. All right, we have these adjectives within these sentences. All right, so now how do we handle these things? It's simple. It's extremely simple. I'll go ahead and write these out in transliteration form. If I get this damn cap off. All right. All right. Ha'ayash zakwan. Zakwan means old, right? Now, here's what you want to remember. We just went over those definitive nouns, right? I'm gonna do these next 3. I'm gonna write them out, and I'm gonna show you what the difference is between what we just learned. All right. Slocky, give me 1 second, y'all. Let me find a better eraser. Slocky. a lot, yeah. All right. I couldn't find one. Bear with me with this board here. Yeah. All right. That don't look like parentheses. Wow. It still looks like parentheses. Whatever. Yeah, I hope y'all know that that's a C. All right. Kakumyu. All right. Now remember, we just read going back to it. We just read the good family. The good family had to have the ha on family. Let's just say, for instance, let's just say the good mother. It would have been ha'ama, hatawa. Now here we don't have the ha. That's the difference here. The difference here is that we don't have the ha on both the adjective and the subject. Why is that? I'll explain why. Because of this is. That's all it is. That's the difference between us having to have the ha on both the adjective and the subject. And both good, both tawab and ama, right? And that's all it is. That's the only difference. Because you can be talking about the good mother, but calling the mother good is a little different, right? Hebrew is a very in-depth language, right? So the way you say something, remember, how are you going to differentiate between the mother is good or you're talking about the good mother, right? That is right there is the reason why now, instead of you having the ha on ama and tuwab, it's just ha ama tuwab. That's the simplicity in it. I know it can be kind of confusing, but that's how simple it is, right? That is going to change the whole way that you structure that sentence, right? Instead of just you're describing the mother in the first one that we just went over, where you have the definitive nouns. This one you're describing the mother, but you're talking about that specific mother being good, right? So, like I said, I know it can be a little bit, it can be a little confusing, but that's the difference, right? That is, let me just put it here. All right. I know it's hard to understand when you've been, taught English your entire life, but that's the sole reason why you don't have ha'ama hatawa, right? Real simple. Excuse me. And if you're taking notes, you definitely want to put this in your notes. Otherwise, you'll just forget. Trust me. I've been there. I've done it. You know what I'm saying? So you definitely want to put this, the reason there's no ha, and connect these two, right? Because that little is right there is changing the whole sentence up. Now you're not just talking about the good mother, you're talking about this mother that is good, right? So I'll let you take a note down real quick. All right, so with that, we're gonna go ahead and close out the class. I hope everybody was able to take at least something away from this class today. Always remember Zephaniah, the 3rd chapter. Always remember that alongside the Most High coming to save us out of our captivity and destroy our enemies, He's also going to turn into us this pure language that we teach in here today, right? Anybody that's watching online, you can see at the bottom of the screen our class schedule. We're here Tuesday through Fridays from 7 to 9 p.m. And then we're also here every Saturday tomorrow. If you're in the area, you Black, Hispanic, and Native American, I'm saying come get down with us for the Sabbath service. Every Saturday we have a Sabbath service from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. That, of course, is Mountain Standard Time, being that we're in Arizona. All right. With that, I'm going to close out the class. Shalom. Yahweh Shem Yahshua B'Rakah Thumb. Yahweh Shem Allah Thumb. Ba'Shem Yahshua. See y'all tomorrow. Shalom Israel.